Chapter 1. The question he never asked. Craig Patterson had always believed that control was the closest thing a person could get to peace. He sat in his mother's sunlit kitchen, one hand wrapped neatly around a ceramic teacup he didn't remember choosing, his posture straight without effort. Years in corporate sales had trained him to occupy space efficiently, never too much, never too little. Across from him, his younger sister leaned back in her chair with the same casual ease she'd always possessed, like the world arranged itself around her without resistance. Nothing had changed. Not really. The same pale curtains stirred lazily in the open window. The same faint scent of lemon cleaner clung to the countertops. And the same ticking clock above the refrigerator seemed just slightly too loud if you let yourself notice it. Craig didn't notice it. Not at first. He was too busy cataloging success. Well, he said, lifting the tea slightly as if it were evidence. Q2 closed stronger than expected. If the market holds, I'll surpass last year's commission by September. His sister gave him a look that hovered between amusement and exhaustion. You talk about your job like it's a person you're in a long-term relationship with. It is, Craig replied without missing a beat. It's just one that pays me back. Romantic, she deadpanned. Their mother smiled softly, watching the exchange, the way she always had, quietly, attentively, as if absorbing the moment rather than participating in it. Craig allowed himself a small, satisfied breath. This was good, familiar, contained. Then his mother asked, lightly, almost as an afterthought, "So, how is your father doing?" The world didn't stop. It just tilted. Craig blinked. Once, slow. He glanced briefly at his sister, then back to his mother. Which one? There was a flicker of something, surprise perhaps, before his mother answered. Your dad. The word landed heavier than it should have. Craig felt his grip tighten around the cup, just slightly. Enough to notice, not enough to spill. He turned his head fully toward his sister now, expecting what? A cue? A correction? She was looking at him, not confused. Waiting. What? Craig asked, a hint of a laugh threading through his voice, thin and uncertain. Why are both of you looking at me like that? His sister shrugged, but it lacked her usual ease. I just figured you'd know. Know what? How he's doing. Craig stared at her. There was a pause, not long, not dramatic. Just long enough for something small and important to fracture. I thought you still talked to him, he said, her brows pulled together. I thought you did. The clock on the wall ticked. Loud now. Craig let out a short breath, the beginning of a dismissal forming on his tongue, but it never arrived. Because suddenly, quickly, and with alarming clarity, he realized he couldn't remember. Not the last conversation. Not the last visit. Not even the last time the thought had crossed his mind. Craig set the cup down carefully. Too carefully. That's not right. I mean, there must have been. When was the last time you saw him? His mother asked, her voice no longer casual. Craig opened his mouth, closed it. The kitchen felt warmer. When did you last talk to him? She pressed. Was there a fight? She asked. No, Craig said immediately, too quickly. No, there wasn't a fight. His sister straightened suddenly, her movement sharp enough to scrape her chair against the floor. Wait, she said, her voice thinner now. Wait. She went still, completely still. Her eyes widened. Not dramatically, not for show, but with the quiet horror of someone realizing something they couldn't undo. I didn't, she whispered. Neither Craig nor their mother moved. I didn't invite him, she said, the words barely forming. To graduation. Craig's chest tightened. I assumed. She pressed a hand over her mouth as if trying to keep something from escaping. Oh my God. She stood abruptly, knocking her knee against the table. I didn't invite him, she repeated, louder now, like she could make sense of it if she said it enough times. Then she turned and rushed out of the kitchen. The sound of the bathroom door slamming echoed down the hall. For a moment Craig couldn't move. Then instinct, something older than thought, pushed him to his feet. Hey! He hesitated, then followed. Their mother was already ahead of him. They found her kneeling on the bathroom floor, one hand gripping the edge of the sink as the other pressed firmly against her stomach. She wasn't crying. That would have been easier. I can't remember, she said hoarsely when they stepped in. I can't remember the last time I saw him. Craig leaned against the doorframe, suddenly unsure of his own balance. That doesn't mean, he started. But it did. All three of them knew it did. When was the last time you talked to him? His mother asked, turning to Craig now, her expression searching, pleading, for something. Anything. Craig swallowed. His throat felt dry. I don't know. The admission hung there, heavy and undeniable. Not weeks. Not months. Years. I thought you. His sister started, then stopped. And I thought you, Craig finished quietly. Silence settled over them, thick and suffocating. A realization, shared and unspoken, took shape in the space between them. They hadn't fought. They hadn't drifted apart in some dramatic, inevitable way. They had simply let him go, slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. Craig turned his head, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked the same as he had that morning. Sharp, composed, successful. But something beneath that surface had shifted. Cracked. The man looking back at him felt incomplete. How? Craig murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Does something like that just happen? No one answered him. And for the first time in a long while, Craig Patterson didn't have an answer either. Chapter 2. The Man Who Isn't Your Father Anymore. They drove separately. No one suggested it. No one argued otherwise. It simply happened as though each of them instinctively knew they would need space before, during, and especially after. Craig followed behind his sister's car for most of the trip, his eyes fixed not on the road ahead, but on the familiar rhythm of her brake lights flickering at intersections. It reminded him, absurdly, of childhood caravans, family drives where their father would hum softly and their mother would narrate directions no one needed. He almost laughed at the memory. Almost. The address had come from something as mundane as a property search, public records, the quiet efficiency of systems Craig trusted far more than people. The irony wasn't lost on him. It brought them to a narrow residential street just outside the city, where houses sat modestly behind low fences, each one distinct in the small ways people personalized solitude. Nothing about the place stood out. Nothing about it said, "He's here." Craig parked behind his sister and cut the engine, but made no move to get out. His hands rested on the steering wheel longer than necessary. He wasn't afraid of confrontation. He negotiated million-dollar deals with people who enjoyed saying no just to hear themselves say it. He could handle tension, rejection, even anger. What he didn't know how to handle was the absence of entitlement. He wasn't sure he had the right to knock on that door. A tap on his window startled him. His sister stood there, arms folded. Her expression taut with nerves she wasn't even pretending to hide. "You planning on living in the car now?" she asked. Craig gave a short exhale and opened the door. "Just thinking about turning around," she said. He stepped out, closing the door with a soft click. "No," she nodded once. "Good. Because I think if we leave now, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life." Craig glanced toward the house again. Beige siding, small porch, a single chair near the front window. It looked quiet. "Let's just go," he said, before he could overthink it, before he could talk himself into believing they were too late. They walked up together, though neither acknowledged it. Their steps unconsciously matched, a habit neither had outgrown. When they reached the door, both of them hesitated. "I'll knock," his sister said quickly. "No, she knocked anyway. 3 firm taps. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Then came silence. Craig became acutely aware of everything. The hum of distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the street, the faint creak of wood settling beneath their feet. "Maybe he's not," his sister started. The door opened. Not abruptly, not hesitantly, just calmly. Their father stood there, older. That was the first thing Craig noticed, not in a dramatic way, but in the accumulation of small, undeniable details. Lines where there hadn't been lines. Hair that had surrendered its color in places. Shoulders that seemed quieter. But it was still him, unmistakably. For a moment, no one spoke. Craig had imagined this scenario on the drive over, versions of it, at least. Anger, shock, relief, something loud and unmistakable. Instead, there was only a steady, almost neutral gaze. Recognition came slowly, but clearly. "Craig," his father said. Then, after a beat, "Emily." His sister inhaled sharply at the sound of her name, like it had caught her off guard. "Hi," she said, her voice thin. Craig opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He wasn't prepared for how easily his father said their names. As if they hadn't disappeared. As if time hadn't been what it was. "We," Craig tried again, then forced the rest of the sentence out. "Can we talk?" A flicker of something crossed his father's face. Not surprise. Not exactly. Consideration. "Yes," he said simply. He stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in." The house was neat. Not sterile, not empty, just intentionally minimal. A couch, a coffee table, a single bookshelf half-filled. Nothing cluttered the space. Nothing suggested anticipation of guests. Craig felt it immediately. This wasn't a place someone expected to share. They sat, Craig and his sister on the couch, their father in an armchair across from them. The distance between them felt deliberate without being stated. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Craig hated seconds like this. In business, silence was a tactic. Something to be controlled, broken strategically. Here, it felt like judgment. His father broke it. "What brings you here?" The question wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. Just direct. Craig exchanged a glance with his sister. She gave him a barely perceptible nod. He took a breath. "We realized we." He paused, choosing the word carefully. "Lost contact." His father tilted his head slightly. That's one way of putting it. There was no bite in the words. That somehow made them worse. Emily leaned forward, urgency breaking through her hesitation. I didn't realize how long it had been until Mom asked about you, and I thought Craig was still talking to you and he thought I was in." She stopped abruptly, swallowing hard. "I didn't invite you," she said, quieter now. To my graduation. The confession hung there. Craig glanced at his father, waiting, bracing for a reaction. It didn't come. Not outwardly. I know, his father said. Craig blinked. You knew. A faint, almost rueful expression touched his father's mouth. It's not difficult to figure out when you don't hear from your children for years. The words were simple, precise. Each one landed exactly where it needed to. Craig shifted in his seat. It's not that we didn't care. His father raised a hand slightly, not to shut him down, just enough to pause him. I didn't say you didn't care. Craig stopped, because that was true. He hadn't said that, and somehow that distinction made everything heavier. His father leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady but not unkind. You want to know what it felt like? He asked. Neither Craig nor Emily answered. They didn't need to. At first, he continued, it felt temporary. Kids get busy. Teenagers pull away. That's normal. He nodded once, as though affirming his own reasoning. So I waited. I told myself it would pass. Craig's hands curled together loosely, knuckles pressing into his palms. But then, his father went on. It didn't pass. The calls got shorter, less frequent. Visits became occasional obligations. Craig flinched almost imperceptibly. And every time, his father said, his voice still even, I'd hear you call someone else dad. The words settled quietly between them. Craig looked down. He remembered. Not clearly, but enough. I knew it wasn't your fault, his father continued. Not entirely. You were kids. Life changes. People adapt. A faint exhale escaped him. But that didn't make it hurt less. Emily wiped at her eyes, her shoulders tightening. Craig felt something sharp press against his chest, an unfamiliar pressure he couldn't easily compartmentalize. It's strange, his father said thoughtfully. Watching yourself become optional. Silence. No anger. No raised voices. Just truth. Craig forced himself to meet his father's eyes. We didn't mean to replace you. I know, his father said. That answer came too quickly. Too easily. I forgave you a long time ago, he added. Relief surged instinctively in Craig's chest, then stopped. Because something in the way his father said it, calm, final, wasn't relief at all. His father sat forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration, he said. Craig's stomach tightened. Years ago, his father continued, I realized that holding on to that part of my life was only bringing me pain. So I let it go. Emily shook her head, panic edging into her voice. You don't mean that. I do, he said gently. Craig exhaled slowly, his thoughts scrambling for footing. You're saying what exactly? He asked. His father met his gaze directly now. I'm saying, he replied, that the man you remember, the one who built his life around you both, he doesn't exist anymore. The words didn't hit all at once. They unfolded, layer by layer. I had to become someone else, his father continued, not unkindly. Someone who could live without expecting phone calls that wouldn't come, without waiting for visits that stopped happening. Pause. Someone who didn't measure his life by what he'd lost. Craig felt his throat tighten. That doesn't mean I wish you harm, his father added. Quite the opposite. I hope you both have everything you've worked for. A faint, tired smile appeared. It sounds like you do. That's not, Craig started. But the words fell apart before forming anything meaningful. Because what was he supposed to say? We're successful? We're doing well? What did that even mean here? Craig tried again, his voice lower now. We didn't realize how far things had gone. His father nodded slowly. I believe that. Emily leaned forward, desperation breaking through. We can fix it. We can start over. His father shook his head. Not harshly, but firmly. No, he said. The word was quiet, unmovable. I've already done the hard part, he continued. I've already built a life that doesn't depend on something that isn't there. Craig felt something in his chest drop, like a step he hadn't seen until it was already gone. I won't go back to that, his father said. I can't. Emily's voice cracked. So, that's it. A long pause followed. Then, softly, that's it. Craig sat there, the weight of those words settling into something permanent. His father stood then, not abruptly, but with quiet finality. I'm glad you came, he said. Truly. It means more than you probably think. Craig looked up at him. Then why? Because closure matters, his father said simply. The precision of that answer felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside Craig. He stood as well, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe because sitting felt too passive, too accepting. I'm sorry, Craig said. The words felt inadequate before they even left his mouth. His father nodded once. I know. Not it's okay. Not I forgive you. Just I know. And somehow that was the hardest thing to hear. They walked to the door together. When it opened again, the outside air felt sharper than before. Craig hesitated on the threshold. There's nothing we can do? He asked. His father considered him for a moment. Then, kindly, but without hesitation, live well, he said. And don't repeat the same mistake with someone else. Craig swallowed. A lesson, not an invitation. Take care of yourselves, his father added. Then gently, please, don't come back. The door closed softly. Not slammed. Not forced. Just shut. Craig remained there for a long moment, staring at the wood grain like he might find something he missed. Beside him, his sister began to cry. Quietly at first, then without restraint. Craig didn't move. For the first time in years, he didn't know how to fix something. And worse, he was starting to understand that this time, there might not be anything left to fix at all. Chapter 3: Cracks in the Foundation. Craig Patterson had always been good at returning to work like nothing had happened. By Monday morning, he was back in his glass-walled office, jacket pressed, tie straight, laptop open before most of the floor lights had finished flickering on. Emails were answered. Numbers were reviewed. A pipeline that had felt solid weeks ago remained, on paper, impressively so. Objectively, everything was fine, which was exactly the problem. Because nothing felt fine anymore. He stared at a quarterly report without actually seeing it, his pen hovering just above the page. Normally, he would already be marking adjustments, identifying weak points, calculating leverage, structuring his next push. Instead, his thoughts drifted. Strange. Watching yourself become optional. Craig pressed the tip of the pen too hard against the paper. A small, dark dot formed where the ink bled through. He set the pen down. Focus, he muttered under his breath. Focus had always been easy. It was a skill he had built deliberately, one of the few things in his life he trusted completely. If something could be earned, measured, optimized, controlled, then it was worth his attention. The past weekend didn't fit into any of those categories, which meant it shouldn't matter, except it did. Craig. He looked up sharply. Mark Delaney stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame with a coffee cup in hand. Late 30s, perpetually relaxed, the kind of man who seemed like he might accidentally succeed at things Craig had to grind for. You planning on glaring that spreadsheet into submission? Mark asked. Craig sat back slightly. Just reviewing numbers. Mark's gaze lingered for a moment, a little too perceptive. Right, he said slowly. Well, try doing it with your eyes actually open. That might help. Craig exhaled, more sharply than intended. What do you need? Ah, there he is. Mark stepped inside, setting his coffee on the desk without invitation. I was wondering if the robot version of you had finally taken over. Craig resisted the urge to rub his temple. You came in here for a personality check. No, Mark said. I came in here to remind you that your 10:30 is already here. Craig blinked. No, it's not. Mark didn't respond. Craig glanced at his calendar. 10:30 a.m., Morales, Lena. Contract discussion. He frowned. He was certain it had been set for 11 o'clock. Moved it up, Mark said helpfully. She called yesterday. Said she had better things to do with her late morning. Craig let out a slow breath. Of course she did. Client from hell? Mark asked, amused. Craig stood, grabbing his tablet. No, just difficult. Mark grinned. Those are your favorite. Craig didn't respond, because that wasn't entirely true anymore. The conference room was already occupied. Lena Morales sat at the end of the table, one ankle crossed over the opposite knee, idly spinning a pen between her fingers. She didn't look up when Craig entered. Not immediately. She made him walk the distance. He noticed everything in the span of those few seconds, the confident posture, the effortless control of space, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but somehow commanded it anyway. He'd dealt with clients like her before, sharp, self-assured, uninterested in being handled. What made her different, Craig hadn't quite figured out yet. You're late, she said without looking up. Craig checked his watch. He wasn't. You're early, he replied evenly. Now she glanced at him, one brow lifting slightly. A pause. Then, fair, she said. Craig took the seat across from her, setting his tablet down with careful precision. Let's get started, he said. Let's not, she countered immediately. He blinked once. I'm sorry. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. Before you give me the polished version of why your company is worth my time and money, I have a question. Craig resisted the instinct to redirect. Go ahead. Do you actually believe in what you're selling? The question caught him off guard, not because it was difficult but because it was irrelevant. Of course I do, he said automatically. Of course you say you do, she corrected. That's not what I asked. Craig studied her for a moment. You're evaluating my conviction? I'm evaluating you, she said. The product is secondary. That wasn't how this worked. Craig leaned back slightly, adjusting his posture. With respect, you requested this meeting to discuss terms, not conduct a personality assessment. And yet here we are, she said lightly. He exhaled slowly. Fine. You want honesty? He asked. I always do. Craig folded his hands on the table. Yes, I believe in what I'm selling because I've seen it produce results. It's reliable, scalable, and tailored to your company's current trajectory. She watched him carefully, then shook her head. That's not belief, she said. That's a brochure. A flicker of irritation surfaced. Craig suppressed it. Then what exactly are you looking for? He asked. She tilted her head, considering him. The part of you that isn't reciting something, she said. Craig laughed once, short, humorless. That's not how this works. Maybe not for you, she said. Silence stretched between them. Craig felt it, an unfamiliar discomfort. Not because he couldn't answer her question, but because he wasn't sure what the answer should be. I get the impression, Lena continued, that you approach everything like a negotiation. That's not a bad trait, Craig said. No, she agreed. But it's limiting. His jaw tightened slightly. In what way? In the way that you're trying to close a deal right now instead of having a conversation. Craig opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, because she wasn't entirely wrong. And that bothered him more than anything else she'd said. I'm here to represent my company, he said finally. That's my role. And outside of that? She asked. Craig hesitated. It was brief, but she saw it. That's what I thought, she said softly. Something in his chest shifted, subtle, unsettling. I don't see how my personal identity is relevant to this discussion, Craig replied. It's relevant if I'm deciding whether I trust you, she said. Craig leaned forward slightly now, tension beginning to thread into his posture. You don't trust me because I'm professional? I don't trust you because I can't tell if there's an actual person behind the professionalism, she said. The words hit harder than they should have, because for a fleeting, unwelcome second, he thought about his father. Someone who could live without expecting phone calls that wouldn't come. Craig sat back again, the motion more abrupt this time. That's a bold assumption, he said. It's an observation, she corrected. Another beat of silence. Then, unexpectedly, Craig heard himself say, and if you decide there is a person? Lena smiled slightly. Then maybe I'll actually listen to your pitch. A strange, almost reluctant amusement tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're aware that's backwards. Oh, completely, she said. But it's more interesting this way. Craig studied her for a moment. She wasn't trying to dominate the conversation. She wasn't posturing. She was simply refusing to play his game, which meant he had two options: force the structure back into place, or step outside of it. The second option felt dangerously unfamiliar, but for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, he didn't dismiss it immediately. So, Lena said, leaning back again, the pen still spinning effortlessly between her fingers. Craig Patterson. His name sounded different in her voice, less like a label, more like a challenge. Who are you? She asked. When you're not trying to close something? Craig held her gaze. For once, he didn't have a prepared answer. And somewhere, beneath the discomfort, there was the faintest hint of something else. Not control. Not strategy. Just possibility. Chapter 4, Terms and Conditions Apply. Craig wasn't used to thinking about conversations after they ended. Not like this. Usually, meetings fell into neat categories: successful, recoverable, not worth the time. He extracted what mattered, adjusted strategy, and moved forward. It was efficient. It worked. But Lena Morales didn't fit into any category Craig recognized. And that bothered him more than he cared to admit. He stood in front of his apartment window that evening, jacket draped over the back of a chair, tie loosened but still hanging in place, as if he hadn't fully committed to being off yet. Below him, the city pulsed in its usual rhythm. Headlights threading through intersections, people moving with purpose, everything in motion, everything predictable. His reflection stared back at him, faint against the glass. Who are you? When you're not trying to close something? Craig exhaled slowly. That's a ridiculous question, he muttered. And yet, he hadn't been able to answer it. Not then. Not now. His phone buzzed on the counter behind him. Craig turned, expecting an email, maybe a calendar adjustment, something normal. Instead, the screen displayed Lena Morales. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he picked up. Patterson, he answered. There was a pause on the other end. Then, wow. You answer your phone like you're expecting a lawsuit. Craig closed his eyes briefly. Morales. Better, she said. Less intimidating. Still a little robotic, but progress is progress. He leaned against the counter, letting out a faint breath of something that might have been amusement. To what do I owe the call? You didn't pitch, she said. Craig frowned. We ran out of time. No, she corrected. You chose not to. That wasn't entirely wrong. You wanted a different kind of conversation, he said. I adjusted. She hummed thoughtfully. So you can adapt. I've been known to. Good, she said. Because I'm giving you another chance tomorrow. Craig blinked. I'm sorry, giving me? Yes, she said, completely serious. I cleared 30 minutes at 4 p.m. If you want the deal, you'll show up. His instinct was immediate. Push back. Reassert control. Clarify that he wasn't the one being evaluated. But then he remembered the conference room. Her refusal to follow his script. The way she'd seen straight through it. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, he didn't push back. Fine, he said. Fine? She echoed. You want a conversation? Craig continued steady. Tomorrow at 4. I'll be there. A small pause. Then faintly, look at that. Almost relaxed. I'll see you tomorrow, Ms. Morales. Lena, she corrected. Craig hesitated. Lena, he said. Good night, Craig. The line clicked. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at it for a moment longer than necessary. Then he shook his head once, as if trying to reset himself. This is a business interaction, he said aloud. The words sounded thin. The next day, Craig was early. Not excessively so. He still had standards, but early enough to control the room before she arrived. He adjusted chairs, reviewed documents, checked his notes. Structure, preparation, control. At exactly 4:02, the door opened. Lena walked in, holding a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. You started without me? She asked lightly. Craig glanced at the untouched documents. Hardly. Good, she said, setting her coffee down. I'd hate to think I missed the boring part. Craig allowed himself a small smile. That would be unfortunate. She studied him for a moment, then tilted her head slightly. You're different today. Am I? He asked. A little less wound tight, she said. Still structured, though. I can practically see the bullet points in your head. He didn't deny that. Habit, he said. Let me guess, she replied, dropping into the chair across from him. Control helps you feel like nothing can go wrong. Craig folded his hands on the table. Control helps things go right. Those aren't the same thing, she said. He met her gaze evenly. In my experience, they often overlap. She smiled faintly. There it is. That's the version of you I met yesterday. And you called that limiting. I did. Craig leaned back slightly, considering her. You seem very invested in this evaluation of me, he said. She shrugged. I don't like doing business with people I don't understand. You've known me for less than an hour total. And I already know you avoid questions that don't have clear answers, she said. Craig paused. That's not avoidance, he corrected. That's prioritization. It's deflection, she said easily. Silence stretched between them. Then, surprisingly, Craig exhaled. Fine, he said. Lena blinked. Fine. You want something unscripted, he continued. Let's try it your way. Something like genuine interest sparked in her expression. Okay, she said slowly. That's new. Craig nodded once, as though committing to something he didn't fully trust. You asked me yesterday who I am outside of work, he said. I did. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table. I don't have a clean answer for that, he admitted. Lena didn't interrupt, didn't fill the silence, just waited. Craig wasn't used to that. I built my life around structure, he continued. Goals, timelines, measurable outcomes. It works. It's predictable. And safe, she added. Craig didn't argue. Yes, he said. Another pause. Then she asked, softer this time. What happens when something doesn't fit into that? Craig felt it again, that uncomfortable shift in his chest. He thought of the house, the door closing, the words he couldn't undo. It doesn't get addressed, he said honestly. Not immediately. Meaning I focus on what I can control instead, he said. Lena nodded slowly, studying him with a different kind of attention now, less challenging, more deliberate. Sounds efficient, she said. It is. Sounds lonely, too. Craig looked at her sharply. That's an assumption. It's an observation, she said, echoing her own words from the day before. He let out a quiet breath, somewhere between frustration and reluctant acknowledgement. You're not wrong, he admitted. The admission surprised even him. Lena leaned back slightly, her posture relaxing. Well, she said, this is definitely more interesting than a sales pitch. Craig huffed a faint laugh. You're not making this easy. I'm not supposed to, she said. Silence fell again. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. Just unstructured. So, she said after a moment, are you going to try to sell me something now? Or was this entire meeting just personal development? Craig hesitated. Then slowly he shook his head. No pitch today, he said. Her brows lifted in genuine surprise. Really? Really? He confirmed. Bold move, she said. You might lose the deal. Craig met her gaze. And for once, that didn't feel like the most important outcome. Then I lose the deal, he said. Something in her expression shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. Respect, or something close to it. Ha! She murmured. Didn't expect that. Neither did I, Craig admitted. A small smile tugged at her lips. Well, she said, picking up her coffee again. Now I'm actually curious what you were going to pitch. Craig let out a quiet breath, something loosening in his chest he hadn't realized was tight. Next time, he said. Her smile widened slightly. Next time, she agreed. And as the meeting ended, not with a handshake sealing a deal, but with something far less defined, Craig realized, with a strange mix of unease and clarity, that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't entirely sure what he was building. But whatever it was, it no longer felt like something he could fully control. Chapter 5. The wrong kind of silence. Craig Patterson had always believed silence was useful. In negotiations, it was a tool, a calculated pause that forced the other party to fill the space, to reveal more than they intended. Silence, when used properly, created leverage. But this kind of silence, the one stretching between him and his phone at 9:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, had no leverage in it at all. It had weight. Craig sat on the edge of his couch, his phone resting in his hand, screen dark. He hadn't called Lena. He hadn't texted her either. Their last conversation, next time, still hung somewhere unresolved. Objectively, there was no urgency, no deadline, no follow-up scheduled, which meant there was nothing to do. And yet, he hadn't been able to shake a quiet, persistent sense that doing nothing was wrong. He leaned back against the cushions, exhaling sharply. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He had clients to close, deals in motion, a week that required precision, not hesitation over whether or not to send a message. His phone buzzed. Craig glanced down. Lena. A single text. "So, is this where you disappear?" Craig stared at the words longer than he needed to. Then slowly he typed back. "I didn't realize I was expected to report in." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Not report. Her reply came through. Participate. Craig frowned slightly. "We don't have anything scheduled," he replied. The response came faster this time. "Right. Because you only exist when there's a calendar invite." He almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he typed, "That's an efficient system." There was a longer pause now. Craig shifted slightly, his thumb hovering near the screen, resisting the urge to add something else, to smooth it over preemptively. Her reply came through. "It's a lonely one." Craig stilled. He read the message once, twice, didn't respond. Well, another message followed moments later. "This is going great." Craig exhaled quietly. Then, before he could overthink it, "I don't know what you want me to say." The typing bubble appeared immediately this time. "Start with something real." Craig leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees again. "What does that even mean?" he muttered aloud. He typed, "Define real." There was a pause. Then something that isn't careful. Craig stared at that. Careful. He considered the word. How much of what he did, what he said, was filtered, shaped, optimized before it ever reached another person? He hadn't thought of it as careful. He'd thought of it as effective. His fingers moved before his instincts could stop them. "I'm not good at that." He sent it. Immediately, he felt something shift. Unsettling, unfamiliar. Honesty without framing, without structure, without a goal. Her reply came slower this time. "Yeah," she wrote. "I noticed." Craig huffed a quiet breath, something like relief and something like irritation mixing together. "Then why keep pushing it?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because you don't actually seem like someone who wants to be that way." Craig frowned. That wasn't accurate. He typed quickly. "It works for me." A longer pause. Then, "Does it?" Craig's jaw tightened slightly. He stood, moving toward the window again without fully realizing why. The city looked the same as it had the night before. Predictable. Ordered. "Yes," he sent. The response took longer this time. When it came, it wasn't immediate. "Then why do you sound like you're convincing yourself?" Craig stared at the screen. Something in his chest tightened. Not sharply, not dramatically, but with a persistent, quiet pressure he couldn't easily dismiss. He opened a reply. Closed it. Opened it again. What was he supposed to say? That control wasn't working anymore? That something had shifted and he couldn't define it? That he'd stood outside a door days ago and realized he didn't know how to fix something that mattered? None of those answers fit into the clean, efficient language he preferred. So instead, he set the phone down. Silence. Real, tangible silence this time. Not a tool. Not a tactic. Just avoidance. The phone buzzed again. He didn't pick it up right away. When he finally did, the message was brief. "Okay." Another followed. "That answers my question." Craig frowned. "What question?" He typed back. The response came quickly. "Whether you actually want this conversation." Craig's grip tightened slightly around the phone. "That's not," he stopped himself. Deleted the message. Started again. "I don't know how to have it." He sent it before he could reconsider. The reply took time this round. Long enough that Craig began to regret sending it at all. When it came, it was simple. "That's different from not wanting to." Craig exhaled slowly. His shoulders felt tense, more than they should. "What do you want from me?" he typed. The answer came back. "Effort." One word. No elaboration. Craig stared at it. Effort. He worked harder than most people he knew. Longer hours. Sharper focus. More discipline. But this wasn't that kind of effort. This didn't have metrics, or guaranteed outcomes, or even a clear objective, which made it risky. "Of course it does," he muttered under his breath. The phone buzzed again. "And before you try to turn this into a strategy," Lena added, "don't." A quiet, reluctant laugh escaped him. She knew. Of course she did. Craig leaned his head back against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. "Effort," he repeated softly. His thumb hovered over the screen again. This time, he didn't overthink it. "Dinner tomorrow." The words sat there for a moment before he hit send. No explanation. No framing. Just a decision. The response came faster than he expected. Was that a question or a statement? Craig's lips curved faintly. An invitation. A beat. Then, okay. No emojis. No qualifiers. Just acceptance. Craig lowered the phone, staring at it for a moment longer. Something in his chest loosened slightly. Not fixed. Not resolved. But moved. And for the first time since this, whatever it was had started, the silence didn't feel like something he was hiding behind. It felt like something he had chosen to step out of, even if he had no idea what came next. Chapter 6, Risk Assessment. Craig arrived 10 minutes early. He told himself it was habit, nothing more. He liked to scout a place, understand the layout, choose the table if possible. Control the variables, even small ones. It made conversations smoother. But as he stood just inside the entrance of the restaurant, scanning a room that didn't require scanning, he knew the truth was less flattering. He was nervous, not about the setting, not about saying the wrong thing. He was nervous about not knowing what the right thing even was. Table for one? The host asked. Two, Craig corrected, then hesitated briefly. Actually, I'll wait. The host nodded and stepped aside. Craig checked his watch. He was still early. Of course he was. He exhaled, rolling his shoulders once as though he could physically loosen the tension out of them. You look like you're about to negotiate a merger, not have dinner. Craig turned. Lena stood behind him, one hand tucked into the pocket of a light jacket, her expression somewhere between amused and observant. You're late, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Am I? He checked his watch again. For 59. Craig paused. You're on time, he admitted. She nodded as if confirming something. Good. I was worried I disrupted your timeline. He allowed a small, reluctant smile. I'm adaptable. Yesterday, maybe, she said. We'll see about tonight. They were seated by the window, a table that afforded just enough distance from the rest of the room to feel private without being isolated. Craig noted it automatically, then forced himself not to treat it like an advantage. This wasn't that kind of interaction. At least he thought it wasn't. Menus were handed out. Water poured. A few moments passed in quiet. Not heavy, not awkward. Just unstructured. Craig wasn't used to that. So, Lena said, setting her menu down without opening it. Is this where you try to control the conversation again? Craig glanced at her, then back at the menu in his hands. I hadn't planned to, he said. Hadn't planned to, she repeated. That sounds like the kind of answer that leaves room for adjustment. He exhaled faintly through his nose, closing the menu and setting it aside. You want me to be direct? He asked. I prefer it. Craig met her gaze. I don't know what I'm doing here. The honesty landed differently this time. Not abrupt, not forced. Just stated. Lena studied him for a moment, then nodded once. Okay. Okay? He echoed. You said something real, she said. I'm acknowledging it. Craig leaned back slightly. You're not going to analyze it? Oh, I could, she said lightly. But I'll give you a minute before I start picking at it. A faint breath of a laugh escaped him before he could stop it. That's generous, he said. I try. The waiter approached and they ordered, Craig choosing quickly, instinctively, Lena taking a little longer, asking questions, making a small adjustment to her order that seemed less about necessity and more about engagement. Craig noticed that. He noticed everything now. It was harder not to. When the waiter left, the quiet returned. Not empty, just waiting. So, Lena said, folding her hands loosely on the table. Do you actually not know why you're here? Or do you just not like the answer? Craig considered that. I know why I asked you, he said. I'm just not sure what I expected from it. And what did you expect? She asked. Craig paused again, this time longer. A structure, he admitted. A clear direction. Lena smiled faintly. And instead, I got this. She leaned forward slightly. And what is this, exactly? Craig hesitated, then said, unclear. She laughed softly. That might be the most honest thing you've said so far. I'm trying something different, he replied. I noticed. Another pause. Then Lena tilted her head, watching him more closely now. You're not used to not having an outcome in mind, are you? No, Craig said simply. Does that bother you? Yes. She nodded. Good. Craig blinked. Good. It means you're paying attention, she said. If you were comfortable right now, I'd assume you'd already retreated into something safe. Craig leaned back, crossing his arms loosely. That's a surprisingly accurate assessment. I'm good at reading people, she said. I've noticed. She smiled slightly. You don't like it. It depends on what you see. Lena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Right now, she said finally, I see someone trying very hard not to revert back to habits. Craig exhaled slowly. That's also accurate. And a little exhausting, I imagine. It is. There was no tension in the admission. Just fact. Their food arrived, giving Craig a brief reprieve from conversation. He focused on the mechanics of eating, the familiar rhythm of it, the structure. But even that felt different, because the conversation wasn't something he could pause and resume at will. It lingered, waiting. Lena broke the silence first this time. "What changed?" she asked. Craig looked up. "What do you mean?" "This," she said, gesturing lightly between them. "You, the effort. Something pushed you into all of this." Craig stared down at his plate for a moment before answering. It would have been easy to deflect, to reduce it to something vague, impersonal. Instead, "I saw someone I disappointed," he said quietly. Lena didn't interrupt, didn't lean in, just listened. "And I realized," Craig continued, his voice steady but lower now, "that I'm very good at prioritizing things that won't leave me." A small silence followed that. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. Lena set her fork down. "That's a very controlled kind of safety," she said. Craig nodded once. "It is. And not particularly sustainable," she added. "No," he agreed. She studied him for another moment, then asked, softer this time, "So what are you trying to do now?" Craig met her gaze again. "Not repeat it," he said. "Simple, direct, unfinished." Lena held his eyes for a few seconds longer, then leaned back slightly, something shifting in her expression. Less scrutiny, more consideration. "That's a better answer than anything you could have pitched me," she said. Craig let out a quiet breath, something in his chest easing. "I'm not pitching," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm still here." A small, unexpected smile found its way onto his face. They ate for a while after that, conversation drifting into lighter territory, childhood stories, work anecdotes, small disagreements about inconsequential things that somehow felt easier, more natural, less constructed. At one point, Lena laughed, fully, without restraint, and Craig realized with mild surprise that he'd caused it. Not by design, not by timing or delivery, just by being there. The realization lingered. When dinner ended, neither of them rushed to leave. They stepped outside together, the evening air cooler than before. Craig hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, "This was good," he said. It sounded insufficient, incomplete, but it also sounded honest. Lena glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It was," she agreed. A brief silence settled between them. Not heavy, just open. Craig shifted slightly, his instinct to define the moment rising again. He resisted it. "Next time," Lena said, almost idly, echoing their earlier conversation. Craig looked at her. "Next time," he repeated. And this time, the words didn't feel uncertain. They felt like something he was willing to risk, even without knowing exactly what they would lead to. Chapter 7, Unscripted. Craig waited at the edge of the sidewalk longer than he needed to. The house looked the same as it had the last time. Quiet, self-contained, untouched by anything resembling urgency. The same chair by the window, the same trimmed hedges. Nothing about it suggested anything had shifted since Craig had stood here days ago with his sister, uncertain and unprepared. This time he was alone. He told himself that mattered. Not because it would change anything, but because it removed the illusion that this was a shared burden. There would be no glances for support, no silent exchanges of "should we say this?" or "what now?" It would just be him, and whatever he had to say. Craig exhaled slowly, then stepped forward and knocked. The sound echoed again, firm, measured, familiar. For a moment nothing happened. Then the door opened. His father stood there, expression calm, though not surprised this time. His eyes rested on Craig with a recognition that felt heavier than before. "Craig." No question, just acknowledgement. Craig nodded slightly. "Hi." A brief silence unfolded. Not awkward, not welcoming either, just waiting. "I won't take much of your time," Craig said. His father watched him for a moment longer, then stepped aside without a word. Craig entered. The air inside felt unchanged, carrying the same quiet stillness. He noticed it again, how little there was to suggest someone else had ever belonged here. This wasn't a home built for a family. It was a life constructed around absence. They took the same seats as before. Craig didn't fidget this time, didn't glance around for anchors. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, and took a breath. "I'm not here to change your mind," he said. His father didn't respond, but he listened. Craig swallowed once, then continued. "I don't," he paused, searching for precision and letting go of it just as quickly. "I don't have a plan for this conversation." A faint shift of interest crossed his father's face. "That's different," he said. Craig nodded. "Yeah." Silence lingered, not uncomfortable, but expectant. Craig looked down briefly, then back up. "I came here because I needed to say something without expecting anything back," he continued. "And I don't think I've ever done that before." His father leaned back slightly, studying him. Craig pressed on. "You were right," he said. "About everything." There was no hesitation in it. No qualification. "I didn't replace you on purpose," Craig added. "But that doesn't change what happened. We didn't fight. We didn't lose each other in some obvious way. He let out a quiet breath. We just stopped choosing you. The words settled into the room with a weight that felt honest. His father's expression didn't harden. If anything, it softened just slightly. Craig continued, his voice steady. I think I told myself that as long as it wasn't intentional, it didn't count the same. He shook his head faintly. It does. Pause. Craig's gaze didn't waver. I'm not here to ask you to fix anything, he said. I already understand that I don't get to do that. His father nodded once, acknowledging, not agreeing. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, Craig added. Not in a vague, I feel bad way. In a specific way. He leaned back slightly now, the tension in his shoulders easing. I see it, he said simply. The room was quiet again. This time, his father spoke first. That's not an easy thing to sit with, he said. Craig let out a faint breath. No, it's not. Most people avoid it, his father continued. Especially when there's nothing they can do to change the outcome. Craig gave a small, humorless smile. That's usually my approach. I know, his father said. The words weren't accusatory, just factual. Craig nodded. I'm trying something else, he said. Another brief silence passed. Then his father asked, why? The question wasn't harsh. It was simple, direct. Craig considered it. Because there were multiple answers, the conversation with Lena, the quiet shifts in how he saw himself, the recognition that control wasn't the same as stability. But none of those felt like the answer. I realized I don't like who I was, Craig said finally. He met his father's gaze. And I don't want to keep being that person. That landed. Craig could see it, not dramatically, not in some sudden transformation, but in the subtle way his father's posture shifted forward. Interest. Real interest. That's a meaningful place to start, his father said. Craig nodded once. I'm not expecting anything from you, he repeated. I just didn't want to walk away from this the same way I walked away before. His father exhaled softly, his gaze drifting for a moment before returning to Craig. You're not, he said. A quiet stillness filled the space again. Not heavy, not fragile, just real. I meant what I said last time, his father continued after a moment. About not reopening that part of my life. Craig nodded immediately. I know. And I won't, his father said. Not because you didn't matter, because you did. More than anything. Pause. But because I've already grieved that loss. Craig didn't look away this time. I understand, he said. And he did. Not completely. Not comfortably. But enough. That doesn't make this easy, his father added. It's not supposed to be, Craig said quietly. A faint smile crossed his father's face, small, but genuine. No, he agreed. It's not. They sat there for a few moments longer, no one rushing to speak, no one trying to stretch the moment into something it couldn't be. Eventually, Craig stood. I'll go, he said. His father stood as well. They walked to the door together. This time, when it opened, the air outside didn't feel as sharp. Craig paused on the threshold. Take care, he said. His father nodded. You too. A brief hesitation lingered, then Craig stepped outside. No request, no question, no expectation, just a conclusion. The door closed again, softly, just as it had before. Craig stood there for a moment, looking at it. Not searching this time, not waiting, just acknowledging. Then he turned and walked away. Later that evening, Craig sat across from Lena again. This time at a small outdoor cafe. Something she'd chosen without consulting him. You look different, she said, studying him as she set her coffee down. Craig glanced at her. That seems to be a theme. It is, she agreed. But this time it's quieter. He leaned back slightly in his chair, considering that. I said what I needed to say, he replied. And? She prompted. And nothing, Craig said. That was kind of the point. Lena watched him carefully for a moment. Then she nodded. That's progress, she said. Craig allowed a faint smile. I think so. A comfortable silence followed, not forced, not filled, just shared. Lena broke it first, though her tone was lighter now. So, she said, are you going to overthink this conversation too? Or can we just sit here like normal people? Craig let out a quiet laugh. I don't actually know how normal people do this, he admitted. Good, she said. Then we'll figure it out as we go. Craig glanced at her, something steady settling into his expression. Unscripted, he said. She smiled. Exactly. And for once, that didn't feel like something to solve. Felt like something to experience. Chapter 8, The Man He Chooses to Be. Craig Patterson did something unusual on a Thursday morning. He didn't check his email first. He didn't open his calendar or scan his notifications or calculate how much time he had before his first call. Instead, he stood in his kitchen with a cup of coffee growing steadily colder in his hand, staring out at the city like he hadn't quite decided what part of it mattered. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden revelation waiting for him in the skyline, no symbolic clarity rising between buildings and glass. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't rushing to define the day before it began. Okay, he said quietly to himself. It was less a plan than an acknowledgement. There were still meetings, still numbers to hit, still a life that required structure and effort and consistency. None of that had gone away, but something inside that structure had loosened. Not broken, just adjusted. His phone buzzed lightly against the counter. Craig glanced over at it, then picked it up. Lena, are you alive? Or did you go back to your natural state of scheduling your breathing patterns? Craig exhaled a quiet laugh as he typed. I like to keep my options open. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. So, that's a yes? Craig leaned against the counter. That's a yes. There was a brief pause. Then good. I was starting to think you only existed in controlled environments. Craig smiled faintly. I've been expanding my operational range. Wow, she replied. Look at you using humor. He paused before responding, then typed careful. You might start encouraging it. The reply took a few seconds longer this time. I already am. Craig read the message twice. There was no pressure in it. No expectation. Just presence. Something steady settled in his chest. Not sharp, not overwhelming. Just there. What are you doing today? He typed. A moment passed before the answer came. Working. Living. Trying not to overanalyze everything within a 5-mile radius. You? Craig considered the question. The old answer would have come easily. A list of tasks, priorities, objectives lined neatly into a sequence that justified itself. Instead, trying something similar, he wrote. He sent it before refining it further. There was no immediate reply, and for once, Craig didn't feel the need to fill the silence. Work unfolded the way it always did. Calls were made. Decisions were negotiated. A contract Lena had once resisted was now on track, not because Craig had pressured it, but because the conversation between them had shifted into something that didn't feel like a transaction. He noticed the difference, not in outcome but in how he approached it. There were pauses he didn't rush through, questions he didn't answer immediately, moments where he allowed things to exist without tightening his grip around them. It wasn't perfect. More than once, he caught himself defaulting to control, to precision, to the familiar structure that had carried him this far. But each time he adjusted, not by force, just by choosing differently. That evening, Craig found himself back at the same outdoor cafe as before. This time, he arrived exactly on time. Lena was already there, sitting comfortably with her coffee. Her posture relaxed in a way that suggested she'd been there long enough to settle in. She looked up as he approached. You're not early, she said. Craig pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. I'm evolving. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. I see that, she said. It's unsettling. He allowed a faint smile. I'll try to make it less alarming. Please don't, she replied. It's more interesting this way. A quiet moment passed between them. Not awkward, just present. So, she said, stirring her coffee absently. What's the update? Have you figured out who you are yet? Craig leaned back slightly in his chair. No, he said. She nodded. Good, she replied. Craig raised an eyebrow. That's not usually the response people expect. It's the only honest one, she said. Anyone who claims they've figured that out is either lying or finished growing. Craig considered that. I'm not finished, he said. No, Lena replied softly. You're not. The certainty in her voice wasn't flattering. It was grounding. So what have you figured out? She asked. Craig didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't have something to say, but because he no longer felt the need to say it quickly. I've figured out, he began slowly, that I've been building my life around things that can't leave. Lena didn't interrupt. I thought that made it stable, he continued. Predictable. Safe. He exhaled quietly. But it also made it limited. She nodded once. That tracks, she said. Craig glanced at her, then back out toward the street. I can't fix what I lost, he said. And I don't get to decide how that part ends. There was no tension in the statement. No resistance. Just acceptance. But I can decide what I do next, he added. Lena leaned forward slightly now, her attention sharpening. And what does that look like? She asked. Craig met her gaze. It looks like showing up, he said. Even when I don't know the outcome. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when I can't control it. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. That's a very inconvenient way to live, she said. It is, Craig agreed. A pause. Then, I think it's better, he added. Lena studied him for a long moment. Not evaluating. Not challenging. Just seeing. I think so too, she said quietly. Something in Craig's chest settled more firmly this time. Not uncertain, not fragile. Just steady. So, Lena said after a moment, her tone shifting slightly back toward something lighter. Are you going to ruin this by trying to define what this is? Craig let out a soft laugh. I was considering it, he admitted. Don't, she said immediately. He nodded once. I won't. Good, she said. Because that's where you usually ruin things. I'm aware. Another quiet moment passed. Then Craig leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. I can't promise consistency yet, he said. Or clarity. Lena tilted her head, listening. But I can promise effort, he continued. Real effort. Not structured, optimized effort. Just showing up. She held his gaze, then nodded once. Okay, she said. No conditions. No qualifiers. Just acceptance. Craig exhaled slowly, something loosening in his chest that he hadn't realized he was holding on to. The evening stretched out naturally after that. Conversation drifting, laughter coming easier, pauses settling comfortably between them instead of pressing to be filled. Nothing was declared. Nothing needed to be. As the light faded and the city shifted into its quieter rhythm, Craig found himself noticing something he might have missed before. Not the outcome. Not where this would lead. But the simple fact that he was here, present, engaged, uncertain, yes, but not withdrawn. And as they stood to leave, Lena glancing at him with something thoughtful but unspoken in her expression, Craig Patterson realized something that felt both small and significant at the same time. He couldn't change the man he had been. He couldn't repair what had already been lost. But he wasn't that man anymore. Not entirely. Because for the first time in a long time, he was choosing something different. And that choice, however quiet, however incomplete, was enough to begin again.